Hello, my name is Mercedes. I'm the person in charge of Nua Biological Innovations, a Spanish lab specialist in omega-3 products. Today I'm going to give you a presentation regarding omega-3 and how we did things differently 16 years ago here in Spain, but also I'm going to explain the use that omega-3 can have in inflammatory conditions, okay? So before we get started, I think there's a couple of concepts that we need to be clear about, which is what are food supplements? Because omega-3 products are not drugs, okay? They are non-prescription products and they can be sold freely. They are a type of food to supplement our diet. Now, according to the European Food Safety Authority, which is the one that creates legislation for food supplements in Europe, food supplements are either nutrients or other substances. By nutrients, they mean vitamins and minerals, and any other ingredient will fall under the other substances section. That's where omega-3 will be, as well as amino acids, other oils, or plant extracts, for example. Now, these products, which can be sold in various formats, they have what they call a nutritional or physiological effect. And I believe that this is a very, very important aspect of food supplements that it's important to understand, especially with omega-3 products, so that we know how to best use them, okay? Now, here's a way to explain to you this difference. Now, normally, through our daily diet, it would be expected that if we eat perfectly okay, we would receive all the nutrients that we need. However, this doesn't really happen, and often we eat in ways where we are lacking certain nutrients. For example, if somebody doesn't eat fish because they don't like fish, it is obvious that they will not be receiving omega-3. So they will need a supplement on this nutrient to give this nutrient to their body. Or somebody who doesn't like milk, dairy products, and so on, they might be lacking calcium in their diet. So they will need a supplement with calcium, okay? So that's what we call the nutritional effect. It refers to a food supplement where we are trying to supply an ingredient that we believe is lacking in our diet. However, when we take this type of supplements, we won't notice anything, okay? It's just like, okay, we know it's good for me, so I'm just going to take it. However, a nutrient can also be taken under physiological conditions with a physiological effect. And here there's a twist, because when we use a supplement under this context, we might notice a difference taking this product. A formulation with ingredients which have a physiological effect are formulations that are stronger. And because of the type of ingredients they have, their bioavailability, their concentration, dosing, and so on, they have sufficient strength to be able to modulate certain reactions in the body that makes us feel better. So we notice the difference between the before and after taking a food supplement. Now, according to my experience over 33 years working in this field, I believe that in the European market, and possibly the Turkish one as well, most of the products have a nutritional effect. So 80% of the products in the market, or even 85%, are probably just products that, okay, you take them, but you won't notice anything. And only 15–20% of the market, you probably notice something when you take them, okay? So this explains why food supplements, which are not drugs, in some instances can make us feel better. But making us feel better doesn't mean they are drugs. They're just a very specific type of physiological product, okay? Now, what's the window of opportunity to use food supplements? Well, a healthy person who has a good lifestyle and they eat nicely, they might want to sort of occasionally use a food supplement to reinforce certain nutrients in their diet. On the other side, we have people who are very poorly, who are on the heavy medication, and sometimes these people, because of the diseases they have, don't receive all the nutrients they need, so they might want to use a food supplement on a nutritional basis. But in between those two sides of things, there is an intermediate area of people who are not 100% healthy, but they are not really so bad as to need medication. And often people in this middle range, they don't feel perfect and they're seeking for wellness. So in my view, people in this sort of gray area, not white, not black, in this intermediate area, are ideal for the use of physiological food supplements that can actually make a difference in their lives and make them feel better. I'm the person in charge of elaborating the formulations in Nua. And my aim in most of the cases is to try and achieve a physiological effect. So this is important for you to know, because most of the market works on nutritional effects, okay? So now we're gonna get slowly into talking about omega-3, but before doing that, we need to have an overview of the type of dietary fats that we have. 90% of the fats that we eat are on a format called triglycerides, okay? A triglyceride, it's a glycerol molecule that can allocate 3 fatty acids. In this case, I have represented the glycerol as a car, as a vehicle, where I have 3 occupants, which could be 3 fatty acids, from whichever food, okay? So that's why it's called triglyceride. But there's also a very similar format called phospholipids, where there are only 2 fatty acids in the glycerol molecule vehicle, okay? And the third occupant is a phosphorus molecule. That's why it's called phospholipid, okay? But humans are used to eat foods in both formats, mainly triglycerides, as I say. So the 10% remaining of our fats in foods will come as phospholipids, cholesterol, and waxes, okay? So now we're going to concentrate on the fatty acids, which are the main occupants of our vehicle. So different type of foods have different type of fatty acids, but in a sense, there are 3 main groups of fatty acids, okay? Which are saturated fats, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats. But before going into those, there's just one thing I want to clarify. We're very familiar with hearing things such as omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. What does this omega mean? This refers to where the first double bond of a fatty molecule is located, okay? For example, fatty acids are a group of carbons which are linked together with joints, okay? And every so often they might have a double bond, not always, but sometimes they do, okay? So wherever the first double bond of a molecule is located, then we determine that gives the numbering of that omega. So omega-3 means that fatty acid has its first double bond on the 3rd carbon of the molecule, on omega-6 on the 6th carbon, or 9 on the 9th carbon. Whether there's 1, 2, or 3, it just determines where the first one is located, okay? Also, marine omega-3 are mainly present in cold water fish, okay? Such as anchovies, sardine, tuna, salmon, but white fish has hardly any omega-3. Okay. Now we're going to see, excuse me, we're going to locate omega-3 amongst all the different fatty acids in the diet. On the left, we have saturated fats, where the joints between carbons are single bonds. There aren't double bonds at all. And these kind of fats are solid at room temperature. Then in monounsaturated fats, we have the most famous one is oleic acid from olive oil, where it only has one single double bond, which is located in the in the carbon number 9. Okay, so that's why it's called omega-9. And then polyunsaturated fats are those that have 2 or more double bonds in their molecule. Okay, so omega-6 have their first double bond on the 6th carbon, and so on. Okay, so we should notice that in omega-3s, there are 2 types of omega-3 which we shouldn't confuse. We can have omega-3 in land plants, okay, but we can also have omega-3 in marine plants. So, and they are totally different. So we should be clear about this, that the kind of actions that land omega-3 have in our bodies are not necessarily the same as those of marine omega-3. Okay, so we're going to concentrate the following slides talking about marine omega-3. First of all, we should know that marine omega-3 are not produced by animals. No animal in the sea produces omega-3. Krill, fish, they just accumulate omega-3 on their body fat. But the merit of producing omega-3 is due to something green in the sea, which we cannot see with our eyes, and we can only see under a microscope, which is called phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are unicellular microalgae, which give that green bluish color to the seawater. And those cells are the ones that produce omega-3. And the marine chain, through the food web, accumulates that in their fat. So like krill oil, which krill is a very small shrimp, okay, which whales feed on. Krill is very tiny, but it's so tiny that the amount of omega-3 it will have is very small. Now, if we move into an anchovy, it's a larger animal, or a tuna fish. So the larger the animal, the more fat they have, so the more omega-3 we will get. So normally, commercial omega-3 brands tend to choose animals which are larger to be able to bring out more omega-3, okay? But from the molecular point of view, they are all identical, okay? Now, fish oil, omega-3, normally come as triglycerides, okay? Our car with 3 occupants, which will be the omega-3 and any other fats within fish oil. However, in krill oil, omega-3 come under the format of phospholipids, which is very similar, but as we mentioned earlier, they only have space for 2 fatty acids, okay? Now, in commercial products, it is necessary to add to the omega-3 we put within our soft gel an antioxidant. Why is that? Well, as you can see on the left, both EPA and DHA are omega-3, but they have several double bonds. So the more double bonds we have in a molecule, the more vulnerable that molecule is to oxidation by oxygen. So in order to protect the oil from oxidations whilst it's waiting for somebody to take it, we need to add an antioxidant to protect that EPA and DHA. In most cases, 99% of cases, vitamin E is used for this purpose. Although sometimes the rosemary extract is also used, okay? In our case, in Nua, we use vitamin E, but it's not from soya, but from another vegetable source, okay? Now, in phospholipids format, they don't need to add an antioxidant because naturally, krill oil contains an antioxidant called astaxanthin, which already protects those double bonds. However, the amount of astaxanthin, or in the case of fish oil or vitamin E, that has the soft gel is very, very small, and it's only sufficient to protect the molecule from oxidation. But when we take it, it has no effect in a general body as such, okay? Also, as far as bioavailability is concerned, the availability of omega-3 from triglycerides and phospholipids are kind of similar, okay? But there is a third format which doesn't exist in nature and which has been created for the convenience of men, called ethyl ester. Ethyl ester is like small car, where you can only locate one single fatty acid, and it's an alcoholic format. The problem with ethyl ester is that when we take an omega-3 under this format, upon digestion, the pancreatic lipase has to separate the fatty acid from the alcoholic vehicle. And this cannot be done so efficiently because the enzymes do not recognize this union so easily. So 30-35% of the product won't be taken up by our body and we will lose it. Okay, so that's why also commercially ethyl ester products are much cheaper than triglycerides. Okay, so this is something to consider as well as far as the availability is concerned. Now I'm going to explain the type of thinking we had in Nua 18 years ago when we were still not in the market. We were doing research on omega-3 products, and by analyzing the existing products, we realized that yes, fish oil products had omega-3, but the majority of the content of the soft gels was not omega-3. 70% of the fats within soft gels were just other fats. Okay, so if normally, say, a fish oil has on average like 40 fatty acids, we were only interested in 2 of them. But in order to benefit from those 2 fatty acids, we were obliged to take 38 other fats, which were not of my interest. Perhaps they are for fish physiology, but not for human physiology. That's why we call them empty fats, okay? Also, looking deep into these fatty acids, we realize that humans don't need to have DHA and EPA always together or in a certain proportion. Both DHA and EPA have their own personality and they have well-defined properties. So we can either have one or the other, and very rarely the 2 of them, okay? So based on this, we decided to find a means of cleaning fish oil from all those fats that were not interesting for us. So by doing so, we could clear a lot of that space and make it available to put more omega-3. So eventually, we managed to get a very clean oil where we mainly had DHA and EPA. But instead of putting them together in a soft gel, we decided to separate them. So each of them will have their own house. DHA will be the main fatty acid in Nua DHA, and EPA will be the main fatty acid in Nua EPA. So by doing that, we managed to fit into one single soft gel more than 1 gram of DHA and more than 1 gram of EPA. So Nua was the first brand worldwide to provide at least 1,000 milligrams of these fatty acids per soft gel, and also we were the first one to separate DHA and EPA in different soft gels. Also, by using the triglyceride format, we achieved the maximum bioavailability, okay? And this enabled, having them on in separate soft gels, enabled us to make tailor-made protocols, be far more precise on the way we use these molecules, okay? So really, at that time, and even currently, but in those days, we really went against the rest of the world. We went against the flow. Nua was born with a concept on omega-3 so different, okay? A high, pure and concentrated omega-3 product having DHA and EPA part. And this includes Turkey. Nothing like this exists in Turkey either, okay? So also, it is important to give the maximum guarantees to users. That's why our oils have been, over the last 14 years, under the IFOS, 5-star IFOS quality certification. IFOS is based in Canada, and every batch we produce is analyzed, and they check that there are no heavy metals, that the product is not oxidized, that there are no PCBs, dioxins, furans, and they also check that the amount of DHA and EPA in each soft gel is never below the values indicated on the label. Okay, it could well happen, because that's something we've seen through IFOS, that we have actually more than the label says, but this is normal because we are working with natural ingredients, and nature is not like a robot. So it is normal that sometimes we have slightly more, but that's not a problem. The main thing is not to be below those values, okay? And also, we've been for the last 3 years part of another quality certification called NSA Certified for Sport, which is important for professional sports, men and women, which guarantees that there are no prohibited, doping substances, okay? And in addition to all this, our products are gluten-free, soya-free, lactose-free, and we don't have fish protein, which means that allergic people can take our omega-3. So these are the products, this is the family of omega-3 from Nua in Turkey, okay? So with small soft gels, well, talking about the soft gels, I'm going to bring back what I mentioned earlier about nutritional dose and physiological or supranutritional dose. What I'm talking about is that with omega-3, depending on the milligrams of DHA and EPA we give, we're going to be either having a nutritional effect or a physiological one. Below 1,000 milligrams, that is like the two products on the left, the DHA one has 500 milligrams of DHA. It's a lemon chewable, okay? And the second one, it has 450 milligrams of EPA. Now, these two products, because they are below 1,000 milligrams, will only give us a nutritional dose of omega-3. So when we take this product, we won't notice anything, okay? But the two ones on the right are products which have at least 1,000 milligrams of DHA or 1,200 milligrams of EPA. This are what we call supranutritional dose, higher dose above 1,000 milligrams, which are going to enable us to notice things when we take them, have a physiological effect. So we will come and explain this further in the following slides. So now, in this second part, we're going to see how our body assimilates omega-3 when we take them, and what can we use them for. So from the dish to the cell, when we eat a food with omega-3 or a food supplement with omega-3, as mentioned earlier, the form that it comes is the triglyceride form, which is a vehicle with 3 fatty acids, where EPA and DHA are, okay? After going through all the digestive process, eventually the occupants of a car, the fatty acids, are going to locate themselves on the cell membrane, okay? Which is the boundary that separates the inside of a cell from the surroundings outside, okay? So, but although we eat food as triglycerides, once the cell takes those fatty acids, it assembles them as phospholipids, and it just puts them around the membrane on a phospholipid V layer, okay? And it's there where EPA and DHA are going to locate themselves throughout all the cells in our body. As we can see here on the left, okay, depending on the type of fatty acids or the occupants of a car, if we eat fats which are saturated or trans fats, they're going to make very rigid that membrane, okay? But if we eat fats, fatty acids, which have many double bonds, those are going to make the membrane very fluid, very soft fluid. And this is very important because the social relationships of a cell are determined by the quality of the fatty acids that are located in that cell membrane. And why is that? Well, located on that cell membrane, we have like parking spaces for different substances in our body. We have receptors where cholesterol, glucose, insulin, and all sorts of hormones and substances park whenever they want to enter the cell. So the way for cells to recognize different substances is through cell receptors, okay? And parking in these receptors is easier if we have a soft and fluid membrane, but if it's very rigid because the type of fatty acids don't have double bonds and make very stiff that boundary, then those receptors might not work as well. So that's why it's kind of important to consider this. I've represented those fatty acids on the left with this castle, where we have the inner part of the castle, which would be the inside of the cell, and the boundaries, in this case, are represented by bricks in different colors. Each brick will be a fatty acid that I have eaten through my diet, okay, with different colors. So this is something to consider, okay? Now, something which confuses users a lot is the fact that Nua has DHA and EPA apart. So they're not sure when to use which. You know, when do I use DHA? When do I use EPA? So a very easy trick, a quick, fast trick to remember is that if we look to the sky, you know, the sky is blue. So from the neck upwards, in a sense, we concentrate most of DHA's benefits. But if we look down to the ground, to the grass is green. So from the neck downwards is where we concentrate most of EPA benefits. Now, when would DHA be of interest? DHA is very important for the fetus development and infant development, both on the visual and brain development, okay? Also, in adults, in visual health, DHA is very interesting for dry eye, for corneal ulcers or earpiece, problems in the retina, in the macula, or optic nerve problems. In the neurological health, it is really good for concentration and attention, as well as for children, adolescents, or adults with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or autism or neurodegenerative diseases. It is also interesting for our cardiovascular health by improving the lining of blood vessels. As well, DHA can increase HDL, or the so-called good cholesterol, and also it can reduce in a very satisfactory way triglycerides, okay? And finally, DHA is very important for men's fertility. The three areas of the body that concentrate the most DHA are the prefrontal cortex in our brain, the retina, especially in the central area or macula, and the sperm, okay? So those are the main areas of DHA. As for EPA, EPA is very interesting in inflammatory conditions, such as skin inflammation, respiratory inflammation, and joint muscle and bone inflammation. In brain inflammation, we would use it together with DHA, okay? It is also probably the most relevant omega-3 for cardiovascular health. It does increase the effect of statins. It does lower triglyceride. It has an antioxidant effect on a cardiovascular basis. It can reduce a bit LDL cholesterol, but in a sense, it's the main omega-3 to consider on a cardiovascular basis. And also, you should know that in neuropsychiatric diseases, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disease, it's also an interesting fatty acid to consider. Now, for all these different uses, we won't be able to see any results if we use the small soft gels we saw before. If we work with doses below 1,000 milligrams, none of these potential improvements will be seen if you take 500, 800 milligrams of DHA or EPA, okay? You need to take 1,000 or more. And in the case of our products, most of these benefits, we're going to see them taken either 2 soft gels of Nua DHA 1000, in the case of these properties here of DHA I highlighted, or 2 soft gels of Nua EPA 1200 in the case of these bottom ones, okay? But we will look at it later on with some examples. So this is very important because if you do not achieve the right dose, you won't see the results you're looking for, okay? Now, regarding possible side effects of omega-3, some people, although this is rarely happens, but it could happen that some people have loosened stools. If that's the case, they should check for the fat digestion. Often people who have gallbladder problems have general problem with fat digestions, okay? Fishy aftertaste is virtually absent when we work with high purity concentrates, like such as Nuas, but there might be people who still have some aftertaste. Now, it's important to take omega-3 always with food, in the middle of a meal or at the end. But if people have a fishy aftertaste, it could well happen that they also have aftertaste with other type of foods which are non-omega-3. And when this happens, it often happens that these people have some kind of underlying problems such as gastritis, a hiatus hernia, and so on. So that's probably the cause of that reaction, but not the actual fish product in itself, okay? Regarding coagulation, this is something that creates big concern to many people. In healthy subjects, no significant increase in bleeding occurs in doses of up to 5 grams of omega-3 per day. So healthy subjects should have no problem whatsoever taking, 1, 2, 3, 4 grams of omega-3, okay? But still, you should know that both EPA and DHA have a moderate anticoagulant effect and antiplatelet effect. So if we have people who are taking medication, anticoagulant, antiplatelet medication, in those cases, there shouldn't be significant changes on coagulation, okay, according to what's been published. However, there could be some cases where using high doses of EPA, and by high doses I mean 3 grams or more, in this kind of people with these medications, there might be a slight increase in the bleeding time, although not necessarily significant. So in these cases, if in doubt, don't work with higher dose, and you could work with a maximum of 2 grams a day, and normally, in most cases, there wouldn't be problems, okay? Another reaction, which we haven't seen in the literature, but we've seen it over the last 16 years in Spain with possibly 7 cases, is that in some kids, we notice that the hair smells like fishy. It's a very rare thing, but it could happen. There should be no concern about this. And this is to do with the fact of how the physiology of those kids process the omega-3. So they release more volatile molecules from the fish oil. The solution to this will be to take the fish product possibly at dinner time or in the evening, so that whilst the kid is sleeping, the fish volatile molecules will be released. So by the morning, the hair won't be smelly anymore, okay? And as mentioned earlier, statins, although combined with omega-3, really give a very powerful mix. Statins are more powerful with omega-3 than without it, okay? And Omega-3 do not, therefore, reduce statins' benefits, but statins, in a way, do reduce a bit omega-3s, okay? But in a sense, taking them together is a very powerful mix with really good results, and there are many studies done with this kind of combination. And now we're going to enter into the third part, which is the use of omega-3 in inflammation. In this respect, I think it's interesting beforehand for you to be familiar with a technique which is kind of interesting in the sense that it has been used in research in a way that has enabled us to see how omega-3 can help us in inflammation, okay? As mentioned earlier, when we take an omega-3 product, those fatty acids within the soft gel are going to locate themselves in the boundary of the cell, on the cell membrane, okay? So it is possible to run an analytical test called fatty acid analysis in red blood cells. This test analyzes the fatty acid composition of the cell membrane of red blood cells, which is representative of the fatty acid composition of the cells in our body. So by doing that, we can have a profile of the type of saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fatty acids, and specifically with polyunsaturated fatty acids, we can actually see which subtypes there are present, and based on that, we can work certain ratios which are really helpful to have an idea of how inflamed a person is, okay? So one of the ratios which is very useful is the omega-3, omega-6 ratio. Normally, it would be desirable that each omega-3 molecule is surrounded by 3 or 4 omega-6 ones, okay? Imagine we have like bricks, no? The green bricks and red bricks. Okay? So each green brick should be surrounded by roughly 3 or 4 omega-6. Okay, this will be the ideal combination. However, by running that test I just mentioned, this has been done, and every omega-3 brick is surrounded by 20 or even up to 40 omega-6 bricks, okay, fatty acids. So this is really offset. This is not good at all because there is too much omega-6 and very little omega-3 in our membranes. And within the omega-6, there is one fatty acid called arachidonic acid, which is especially present. It is very abundant in the foods we eat. And there's far too much. And this is going to have huge consequences, as we'll see now, on inflammatory conditions. So remember this for later on. There's a second ratio that we can measure through this test, which is the omega-3 index. The omega-3 index measures the amount of EPA plus DHA on our cells, okay, in our cells, as a percentage. So it's considered that below 4%, it's a very low omega-3 index. Between 4 and 8% is an average intermediate value, and above 8% is an optimal omega-3 index. There are some papers that have measured the omega-3 index worldwide, and as for Turkey, well, Turkey is in the red area, in the very low omega-3 index, together with other countries, okay? Spain is in the intermediate range, for example, okay? And we only get in the optimal range, you know, Inuits and people who live and eat lots of raw fish, you know, in northern areas of the hemisphere, okay? But this is like an interesting ratio also to consider, because this ratio is considered a biomarker of cardiovascular risk. So the lower the omega-3 index, the higher the risk of suffering from future cardiovascular problems, okay? So that's where this index comes. Now, a third ratio, which is very more connected with inflammatory conditions, is the ratio between arachidonic acid, which is that omega-6 molecule which is so abundant in a diet, and EPA, the marine omega-3. So it's considered a biomarker of chronic silent inflammation. There are other markers that you're probably familiar with, like C-reactive protein or nuclear factor kappa B. So this ratio, based on these two fatty acids, is very, very interesting as far as chronic inflammation is concerned. A good value would be between 1.5 to 3, okay? But a value of 15 would be really bad. And in between, we have intermediate values. Desirable value recommended would be between 3 and 5, okay? So here you have a typical range, which shows how inflamed we are inside, okay? Below 5.8, that person will be quite inflamed. Intermediate inflammation between 5.8, 14. Sorry, I got it wrong. Somebody below 5.8 will be in a really good condition. Between 5.8 and 14, he'll have an intermediate inflammatory situation in the body, and above 14, that person will be very much inflamed, even if the person doesn't notice anything, okay? It could just be a chronic silent inflammation. Now, for example, in the literature, there are some papers where possibly taking around about 1 gram of DHA and half a gram of EPA a day in the course of 5 weeks can reduce this ratio by 1/3, okay? So just to have an idea of how long it would take to improve this ratio in time, okay? And obviously, the more omega-3 you take, the quicker you'll be able to improve this ratio, so less weeks, it'll take less time, okay? The most effective doses to reduce this ratio would be on the range of round about 50 milligrams of omega-3 per kilogram of body weight, okay? So that's roughly 3 grams of omega-3. It could be between 2 and 3 grams possibly, okay? But to get a really effective improvement in this ratio. Now, regarding omega-3 index, how could we possibly improve that, okay? Something that in observational studies, which is important to notice, the higher the omega-3 index, normally the lower the inflammatory markers are. However, this correlation does not equal to causation, okay? So it doesn't mean that a high omega-3 index it's the reason why you're less inflamed, okay? But this has been observed. Normally, if we increase the omega-3 index, there is an increase, an improvement in the arachidonic to EPA ratio, okay? So practically speaking, if we want to increase our omega-3 index, we can just do it by just taking DHA or just taking EPA or taking a mix of both of them. And this has been done in literature, and what they've seen is that DHA on its own increases the omega-3 index better than a mix of EPA and DHA, and these two do it better than EPA. So EPA is the one that reduces omega-3 index the least. The best one is DHA, and in an intermediate way, both EPA, a mix of EPA and DHA. Okay, and this rate of increase is roughly as shown here. If you only give DHA, the increase could be between 4 and 5%. If you only give a mix of them two, between 2 and 4%, and with EPA, 1% increase. The more dose we give, the same as before, the more we can increase the omega-3 index, okay? For example, in a 6-month period, if we take 1 gram of EPA and DHA, we can increase by 4% the omega-3 index. But if we take 2 grams, twice as much, probably in 3 months, we'll achieve that same increase, okay? So always more dosing, we get faster results. And now we're gonna get into more detail regarding inflammation. Here we have a drawing of a section of the cell membrane with a V layer of phospholipids. And as we know, each phospholipid, which can see in the car here, can hold 2 fatty acids, okay? Now, we're gonna look at this now in our castle, just to make it more visual, okay? So here we have the cell membrane. Those fatty acids which were in the phospholipids now here are represented by bricks. Different colors represent different fatty acids. In this case, I've represented in red arachidonic acid, which is that omega-6 fatty acid, which is so frequent in our food through meat, dairy products, processed foods, and so on. Okay, so that's which is very much present in too much excess, no, on our cell membranes. Then here I've put a bit of oleic acid from olive oil, and DHA and EPA from fish. DHA in blue, EPA in green, okay? So as mentioned earlier, this fatty acid that we take through our diet will locate on the cell membrane, okay? And once they are there, they are part of the structure of the cell membrane. But these fatty acids will not remain there forever. There are some enzymes which are represented by these scissors, and a specific one called phospholipase A2 is going to release these bricks from these fatty acids from the membrane and free them from there. So once they are on a free way, then they are vulnerable to the attack of other set of enzymes, which you're probably familiar with, which are COX and LOX, cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase. I represent them here like vultures, okay? Like if we have a castle with vultures going around, waiting for something to move and to eat. So these vultures, COX and LOX, are only capable of grabbing these fatty acids only when they are in the free form, right? When they've been released by phospholipase. So when they're in the free form, this COX and LOX process this, in this case, this arachidonic acid, the red brick, and converts this fatty acid into fatty subproducts which inflame our body. Here we have prostaglandins, thromboxans, and leukotrienes. All these substances, which are called pro-inflammatory eicosanoids, are fatty substances that our body produces using as a substrate a fat which forms part of the food we eat. So the food we eat can generate inflammation or fuel existing inflammation. So it's very important that not only prescribe drugs to control inflammation, we need to educate patients on how they can make things better for themselves by improving the way they eat, okay? So when a person has all these inflammatory substances after processing the arachidonic acid from the diet, that person feels poorly. So they go to the pharmacy asking for an anti-inflammatory drug. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are often used for this purpose. And the way they work is by blocking the COX enzyme. COX-2 enzyme is blocked by them, which means that the prostaglandins and thromboxans will not be produced, and I will feel better, okay? Like corticoids, which are also used, corticoids work by several means, but one thing they do is they block phospholipase A2 or slow down the way it works, which means that less fatty acids will be released from the membrane, so there is less substrate for COX and LOX to process, so they can produce as many inflammatory substances, okay? So that's another way they work. Now, in the case of EP and DHA, they can both block as well COX-2, okay? The same as anti-inflammatory drugs, but they don't do it straight away. And non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs will block COX-2 within half an hour or an hour of taking it. This will never happen with omega-3, okay? This will never happen. So that's why in acute inflammations, we cannot use EPA and DHA, okay? Because they won't give us that fast relief we are looking for. Now, the same happens with corticoids. EPA has a kind of corticoid effect in the sense that it so slows down phospholipase A2, but it will not do it straight away. Okay, so once again, acute conditions are not good for omega-3. Omega-3 are really interesting and useful in chronic inflammatory conditions. Okay, so that's where EPA and DHA makes sense, the use of them. Also, EPA can block the LOX enzyme, okay? So it can prevent the formation of, or slow down the formation of leukotrienes. So that's another mechanism. And also EPA has 20 carbons, exactly the same as arachidonic acid. So it competes with arachidonic acid to use that space. So it's going to disturb arachidonic acid, so there's not so much in the cell. So there are different means in which EPA and DHA can help us in inflammatory conditions. But we shouldn't forget that because we've taken DHA and EPA through fish, okay, excuse me, which we've taken DHA and EPA, then those blue and green bricks will also go to our membrane, which means that phospholipase A2 will also be releasing EPA and DHA from the food supplement or the fish that we have eaten. And what happens is that when we have our EPA and DHA on a free state, these same enzymes are going to process this omega-3. But the resulting fatty subproducts will be anti-inflammatory. And these subproducts are called SPMs, special pro-resolving mediators. And there are SPMs of different types. EPA SPMs are called E-resolvins, and DHA SPMs are called D-resolvins, as well as protectins and myrisins. So DHA has more resolving substances, SPMs, than EPA, okay? And these substances are very, 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 very interesting. Why? Because these substances are capable of reducing pro-inflammatory substances like cytokines. They can also stop the recruitment and activation of immune cells and promote the clearance of all the cellular debris and dead cells in the damaged area, and also help tissues to resolve inflammation and repair themselves. And also SPMs have antimicrobial action. So these derivates from EPA and DHA are very, very interesting indeed. They are so interesting that SPMs are the inflammatories of the future, okay? DHA and EPA are precursors of SPMs. So I take DHA and EPA, they go to my cell membrane, and they can have anti-inflammatory actions by themselves just by being DHA and EPA through blocking COX or LOX, as explained earlier, but also through their transformation in SSPNs, which have also anti-inflammatory actions, okay? Most of the studies done so far in the area of inflammation have been done with products which mix DHA and EPA. And only recently, in the last few years, studies are being done with separate forms and high concentrates. So it is to be expected that in the years to come, we'll be seeing more and more studied with separate DHA and EPA, okay? Most of EPAs and DHA anti-inflammatory actions are going to be expressed from 2 grams onwards, between 2 and 3 grams onwards. Okay, that's when we get the real potential. And even generating these SPMs, that's going to happen closer to 3 grams. But with 1 gram or 500 milligrams, we won't see these effects, okay? It's been published how omega-3 are quite, good at reducing inflammatory substances such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-6, or C-reactive proteins, okay, in various inflammatory conditions. And when can we see the effects? Well, using the right dose, in most cases, effects can be seen in the course of the second month, okay? Or in some cases, they can be seen earlier. Like, for example, we have experience with rheumatoid arthritis, and we can often see results in the first month. But in some other cases, it could take at least 4 months to see some results, such as in autoimmune diseases like lupus, okay? So it could vary. And in the previous slides, I've been discussing how omega-3 can have a big effect on lipid inflammatory mediators, how they can prevent the formation of prostaglandins, thromboxans, and so on, okay? But we shouldn't forget that omega-3 are really powerful at inhibiting the formation of pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as tumor necrosis factors, interleukins, and so on. Both DHA and EPA are very powerful, but especially DHA, okay? DHA is very powerful against cytokines. And this, so basically, as far as chronic inflammatory conditions are concerned, omega-3, if we use it in the right dosing, has a huge potential, not only fighting fatty inflammatory mediators, but also protein inflammatory mediators. And just to, as concluding remarks, mention that diets which are rich in arachidonic acid, such as meat, fish, dairy product, or processed foods, are pro-inflammatory, okay? And concentrated sources of DHA or EPA are capable of balancing that excess of pro-inflammatory effect that this kind of foods rich in arachidonic acid can have. Below 1,000 milligrams of DHA or EPA, we will be talking about mainly nutritional use. So it's difficult. We'll hardly notice anything as far as inflammatory conditions are concerned. Beyond 1,000 milligrams, mainly between 2 and 3 grams a day, both DHA and EPA are capable of controlling not only inflammatory body fats, but also inflammatory protein components, okay? And both DHA and EPA display different anti-inflammatory strategies. In some instances, they are similar. In some instances, they are different, okay? So anyway, that's all for now. I hope everything is clear and that this presentation will help you get into the insights of omega-3 and inflammatory conditions. Thank you very much.